Hey there and welcome back to my channel, and hello to everybody that's new here. I think since my last video that I posted quite a few months ago, there's about 100 of you that are new, so thanks for subscribing and thanks for being here. I feel a little bit awkward just because I haven't been in front of a camera for quite a while. So to get back into the swing of things, I thought I'd start out with a video about my 2022 stats. So in today's video is just going to be a 2022 wrap up, and then near the end of it, I'll talk about some goals that I have for myself in 2023. So starting off with my reading goal for 2022, my reading goal was set to 20 books. In 2022, I really just wanted to focus on getting back into reading and finding joy and fun in reading. 2021 for me was a year where I really pushed outside of my comfort zone, and I still did that in 2022, but I just really wanted to get back to the love of stories and the fun and love of reading, which is why I only set the goal to 20 books. That way I didn't feel pressured to hit a certain goal. So I ended up reading 98 books, which is just short of 100. I could have pushed myself, but again, I decided to slow down and just really take my time and enjoy the books that I was reading, and I'm so glad that I did that. Now, in terms of moods and the types of books that I was gravitating towards, that remained relatively the same as 2021, with my top 5 moods being mysterious, dark, emotional, reflective, and adventurous. I think adventurous is a little bit bigger than last year just because I did start gravitating to some more plot-driven books and books that just made me laugh and smile and just sucked me right in. In general, I'm someone who likes very slow-moving, reflective, weird books that are emotional and hard-hitting, and I think I'm finally coming into my phase of enjoying just plot-driven, fun books, and I hope to continue that into 2023. So in terms of pace, this is where there was a big shift. So 8% of the books that I read were slow books, 20% of the books that I read were fast books, and about 72% of the books that I read in 2022 were medium-paced books, which was really surprising to me because I still felt like I was reading very slow-paced books. But hey, looks like that wasn't the case this year. Now, in terms of the types of books that I read based on page number, about 58% of the books that I read in 2022 were between 300 and 500 pages. 7% of the books that I read were over 500 pages, and about 35% of books that I read were under 300 pages, which I would say really tracks with my overall reading. I am a very slow reader. The only time I read fast is when I listen to audiobooks, and even then, it's not that I'm reading fast, it's just that I'm spending a very significant portion of my time listening to books while I'm cooking, while I'm doing chores, etc., right? I have less time to sit down and read a physical book because I have other things to do. So when I sit down to read a book that is over 500 pages, it takes me months to read. I don't remember if it was in 2021 or in 2020, I read It by Stephen King, and I think it took me like 4 months to read. And it's because I'm a slow reader and because I like to take my time with books. So as much as I would love that 7% to go up, I know that it's probably not going to go up any significant amount anytime soon because I just lack time. So we'll see. We'll try to fix that this year, but we'll see. Moving on. So 82% of the books that I read were fiction books and 18% were nonfiction, which makes me really, really, really happy because one of my 2022 reading goals was to read one nonfiction book a month, and I actually ended up surpassing that. Out of the 98 books that I read, 17 of them were nonfiction books, which means that I stuck to my goal of reading one nonfiction book a month on average, and then some, which makes me really excited, and that's actually one of the goals that I hope to continue on in 2023. So my top 7 genres were fantasy at the top, followed by mystery, literary fiction, thriller, horror, historical, LGBTQIA+ books, and then science fiction, which again is not a surprise. These genres were the same as last year. They were just in different order. I believe last year my top genre was thriller books. So in 2022, my most read authors were Brandon Sanderson with a total of 5 books. And the reason for this is because I ended up reading Warbreaker at the beginning of 2022, and then I started and finished Mistborn Era 2 because The Lost Metal was being published in 2022. He's followed by Silvia Moreno Garcia at just 3 books. Silvia Moreno Garcia is one of those authors that really intrigues me. There's only one book of hers that I can genuinely say that I love this book, and that's Velvet Was the Night. All of her other books end up being 3 or 4 star reads for me, but there's just something so versatile about her books that just pull me back. I really like to see what she does with the setting and how she weaves her stories in the setting that she chooses. All of her books take place in Mexico in a different time period, and it's always just fascinating to me how she's able to bridge the politics of that era with her characters and her plot, and then provide her subtle commentary. So that's the reason I keep coming back to her books, and hey, this year I'll probably continue reading through her backlist. She actually does have a new book coming out called Silver Nitrate later this year, which I do have a copy of because of NetGalley, so I'll probably be reading that within the next couple of weeks or so. After Silvia Moreno Garcia, I have 2 other authors. I have El Cosimano and S.A. Chakraborty. I read 2 books from both of those authors this year. I ended up finishing the Finley Donovan series up to Finley Donovan Jumps the Gun. I also received a NetGalley arc, so I was able to read it earlier this year, and I really liked it. I love that series. That's one of the series that I go to when I just want something fun and I just want to have a good laugh and I just want to have a good time. And then I actually ended up starting and finishing the Devilbot trilogy. I finished Empire of Gold this January, so you'll probably hear about it during my January wrap up. It was really fun. The characters you really start to love as you go through the series. There's tons of political intrigue, and I just love how rich and vivid that world felt. Now, in terms of star rating, my average rating for the year was 3.91, which is on the higher side. It's definitely higher than last year. I want to go back and check. Let's see. Barely. Last year's was 3.87. So overall, I read less books, but I had a higher average rating, which means I enjoyed more of the books that I read this year compared to 2021. And yeah, that feels about right. The shortest book that I read in 2022 was 105 pages, and this was Ghosting the News, Local Journalism and the Crisis of American Democracy by Margaret Sullivan. This was a really interesting book. It's one that I actually highly recommend for you to pick up because it talks about the decline of local journalism and the ramifications of that, like keeping local government officials accountable and really reporting on local news. It wasn't a read that was riveting or kept me at the edge of my seat, but it was one that was very informative. The longest book that I ended up reading is Warbreaker by Brandon Sanderson. For some reason, this feels wrong. So I started Empire of Gold in 2022, but I didn't finish it until this year in 2023. So I guess that's why it's not listed. But yes, this was 688 pages. Yeah, it was fun. I really like Brandon Sanderson's imagination, his writing style. And so, okay, this year I was going to start the Stormlight Archive, but I ended up putting a poll on Instagram asking y'all if I should start the Stormlight Archive or the Game of Thrones, because a couple of other people here on BookTube are doing a read along, and I know that I couldn't prioritize both, and a Song of Ice and Fire one. So I did start a Game of Thrones, and I'm surprisingly really liking it. It's incredibly digestible, and I'm someone who watched the show before reading the books, so a lot of the characters that come up, I already have an idea of who they are. If I hadn't watched the show, I feel like it would have been a little bit overwhelming just because it is such a large cast of characters. But so far, really enjoying it. I'm just about 100 pages through or something like that. So in terms of authors, so of the 98 books that I read, 23 of those books were written by men, and 75% and 75 books were written by women, and that is completely intentional. During my 2021 stats video, which I'll link down below if you're interested in that, my most read authors were white men, and I really wanted to flip that around this year, so I think I did a pretty good job. Now, I did participate in the Instagram challenge of reading 20 books by Black women, which was started by @melanated_reader, and I did end up completing that challenge, which is fantastic. And you know, that goal isn't a one-time thing where I'm just trying to check off a box. It's a thing that I want to continue to incorporate every single year. So that's another goal for me this year, to again read 20 books by Black women and even more, right? One of the goals that I have this year is to read more classics, and specifically more translated classics, more classics by people of color, more classics by Black women, just more classics, but with a focus outside of the standard Western canon. So those are my stats for 2022. Now we'll move forward and talk about some of my goals that I have for this year, for 2023. A new goal that I have is that I want to write a review for every single book that I read, whether it's on Instagram, on YouTube, or on Goodreads. Goodreads and or Storygraph is the primary place where I write my full-length reviews for all of the books that I read. So in the past, I've gotten lazy and I'm like, oh, I'll leave this review for another day, or it's a book that just made me think in a very critical way, and I have to step away before writing my review, and sometimes I don't come back. And that's a challenge for me, because then when I sit down to film my monthly wrap-ups, if I've read a book at the beginning of the month and now it's the next month, sometimes I can't remember what I felt in that moment, or I can't remember the subtleties of certain books that just made me fall in love with a story, or sometimes I can't even remember the plot if it's a forgettable book. So this year I'm challenging myself to write a review for every single book that I read on Goodreads, and then try to incorporate all of the books that I read into monthly wrap-ups. I've already talked about some of these goals, but I just wanted to reiterate them again. So reading at least 12 nonfiction books, reading at least 20 books by Black women, and start reading more classics. More recommendation videos, that's another goal for me this year. So this year, I just want to share all of the books that I love with you, especially because I don't always talk about all of the books that I read. So more recommendation videos. Another thing that I really want to focus on this year is to read backlisted books of authors that I already love. Something that I was really good at in 2020 and 2021 is really diversifying my reading, finding new authors, exploring new genres. And I feel like I have a pretty good grasp of the books that I like now, and authors that I really enjoy, like Tiffany D. Jackson, Silvia Moreno Garcia, Jeff Vandermeer, Tochi Onyebuchi, Tia Williams. So this year I really just want to go back to some of my most loved authors and become intimately familiar with their backlisted books. Something that I really want to do is start with their very first novel and read through their backlisted works to see how their writing progressed, their thoughts progressed, their creativity progressed. I just think that that's going to be a really fun project for me, so I'm hoping to do a little bit of that this year. And then finally, a channel goal, and it's something that I've already been doing, but it's to continue to read diversely, really take a look at the books that I'm reading, see who is missing, is there any particular group that I'm excluding or forgetting, so just including as many diverse voices as I can. In 2022, I started a project where I read books from every single Latin American country. I fell off of that towards the end of the year. The end of the year tends to not be a very good time for me. I struggle with some mental health issues, and it really took a toll on me last year, so I had to disconnect from a lot of things in the latter half of 2022. And even though I'm disappointed in myself that I didn't continue on that project, that doesn't mean that I can't pick it back up. So I want to continue to read through those Latin American countries this year. I'm not exactly sure how I'll structure it. I don't know if I want to pick a country for a month, or if I want it to be less structured and just, have a map of the countries that I'm missing, and based on the month and the books that I find, just sort of picking based on what I'm feeling. I'm not sure yet. I still need to think that through a little bit more, but it's definitely something that I'm going to continue this year. So that was my 2022 wrap up and some of the goals that I hope to achieve this coming year. I'm incredibly thankful and blessed that you're here, and I can't wait for the rest of 2023. I'll see you later. Bye.